She blocked my driveway one too many times. The HOA wouldn't help. So I handled it myself. And what happened next made her wish she'd never messed with me. Every morning, like clockwork, I'd step outside with my coffee and stop short. There. It was again that oversized luxury SUV parked right across my driveway, completely blocking it. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a delivery driver who didn't realize they were cutting off my exit. But by the third day, I knew this was no accident. It was deliberate. I started leaving notes. Nothing rude, just simple, polite reminders like, "Please don't block the driveway. I need access." The first one disappeared. I thought maybe the wind had taken it. The second ended up crumpled on my front lawn. By the fifth, I found it torn and stuffed under my wiper blade like a taunt. Every note ignored. Every message disrespected. You'd think something as basic as being able to leave your own home wouldn't be a daily battle. But this woman made it one. She lived a few houses down, but she liked the shade that my tree provided. Or maybe she just liked making people uncomfortable. Either way, she parked there almost every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes overnight, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. I started taking photos. I logged the times, the weather, everything. I even installed a small dash cam too, catch her pulling in and out. Then, I submitted it all to the HOA with a detailed complaint. They replied 2 days later with a form letter. This appears to be a private parking concern. The HOA does not get involved in personal disputes between residents. That was it. No help, no follow-up. Just a polite version of not our problem. But it was their problem. This wasn't a neighbor misunderstanding, this was harassment. And I was starting to realize she wasn't just some entitled woman with a parking problem. She had connections. As it turns out, she was close friends with one of the HOA board members. The one who always acted a little smug during community meetings. That explained the sudden cold shoulders from neighbors I used to chat with. Word was spreading, but only her side of it. Then came the day that made me snap. It was a Saturday morning. I was supposed to drive my dad to the hospital. It wasn't an emergency, but his health had been declining, and every appointment mattered. I walked out with my keys in hand, and there it was again, that SUV parked square across my driveway. I rang her bell. No answer. I knocked on her door. Nothing. I tried calling the HOA member she was friends with, and it went straight to voicemail. I waited 15 minutes, then 30. My father sat beside me on the porch, coughing gently, trying to hide how worried he was. I couldn't wait anymore, so I backed my car across the lawn and over the curb, scraping the underside on the way out. That sound metal against concrete was burned into my ears. I checked the side panel later. A 6-inch scratch right above the tire. Easily a few $100s in damage. As we drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her standing in her yard in a robe, sipping coffee, watching, and smirking. Not apologizing, not surprised, just ... entertained. That's when it hit me. She wanted this. This wasn't about parking. It wasn't about convenience. It was about power. She had it. I didn't, and she knew it. I spent the rest of that day fuming, but I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. I didn't key her car or slash her tires. That's what she probably wanted, some reaction she could twist around to make me the villain. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. If the HOA wasn't going to help me, I'd help myself. And I wasn't going to do it loud. I was going to do it smart. No more notes. No more calls. I would become meticulous, strategic, surgical. Because if she wanted to play games, ... fine. But I was going to win. I started treating it like an investigation. If the system wasn't going to protect me, then I'd build a case so solid it couldn't be ignored. Every day I noted the exact time she parked and the moment she left. I took wide shots and close-ups, license plate, car make, even the state of her tires to prove it hadn't moved for hours. I organized everything in a folder on my computer labeled blocked access evidence. Every picture was dated and time-stamped. I even set up an old phone as a security camera pointing directly at the driveway. It recorded in time-lapse showing just how long that black SUV sat in front of my home like a stubborn monument to disrespect. For 2 weeks, I gathered footage. She was consistent. Morning drop-offs, mid-afternoon lounging, even late-night visits where the car would sit until dawn. And always the same result. I couldn't leave when I needed to. She didn't care.
Oh.
The more I ignored her, the more she seemed to take pleasure in it. One day I walked out to find her sitting in her SUV, windows up, music playing, sipping a drink, just idling across my drive like she was at a spa. I took a picture of that too. Zoomed in, facial expression and all. I knew documentation wasn't enough. I needed to understand what legal ground I stood on. So I dove into city ordinances, homeowner rights, street access, lost anything I could get my hands on. Turns out, while the street in front of my house was technically public, *** driveway. Obstruction *** was illegal in my municipality. Better yet, there was a clause buried in a code section stating that repeated obstruction of private residential access could be handled by the property owners, especially if it caused verifiable inconvenience or safety risks. I called a local tow company. I didn't identify myself, just asked general questions. The guy on the other end was surprisingly helpful. If it's your driveway and you've got proof, especially if it's the same car doing it again and again, you can tow, he said. We'll ask for a video or photos and a written statement, but if it checks out, we'll send someone over, no problem. Then he added, and you don't even need to give notice if it's blocking access. That's the key. Blocked access. We can move. That was it, my golden loophole. But I couldn't just call them yet. I wanted everything to be undeniable, so I set the trap. I parked my own car just slightly deeper into the driveway, making it clear where the entrance began and ended. Then, I adjusted my new camera's angle to catch both her car and mine in the same shot, making the obstruction even more obvious. I also placed a small reflective cone at the edge of the driveway, just to add a visual marker, not a barricade. Enough to make it crystal clear where the private space started. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, she pulled right back in front of the cone like it didn't even exist. Her front bumper was practically kissing my mailbox. I stared at the footage that night like it was a courtroom exhibit. It was perfect. Date, time, visibility. My car in the background, her car dead center. I saved a copy to a USB and backed it up to the cloud. Then came the final straw. It was a Tuesday. The weather had turned ugly, pouring rain, thunder, the kind of day you just want to stay home. But I couldn't. I had an important job interview, the kind you wait weeks for. I'd ironed my shirt, printed my resume, and rehearsed my elevator pitch the night before. I stepped outside with my umbrella and stopped dead. Her SUV was there again. Same spot. Wheels turned in slightly. No lights, no signs of life. I rang her bell. No answer. I knocked on her car window. She ignored my eyes. Glued to her phone, I tried to maneuver around her vehicle. But the rain had softened the grass near the curb. I wasn't about to get stuck in mud or ruin my suspension again. So, I waited and waited. 20-5 minutes passed. By the time I finally got around by cutting through a neighbor's yard and nearly clipping a low stone wall in the process, I was already late. I arrived at the interview drenched, flustered, and completely out of rhythm. I tried to play it cool, but my brain kept flashing back to her smug face, her car in front of my home like it belonged there. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. On the way home, my anger gave way to clarity. Done collecting evidence. I was done waiting for justice to magically appear. I had the proof, I had the law, had the means. Now, I just needed to make the call. She'd wanted this to be a power game. She had no idea I was about to flip the board. It happened on a Wednesday. A bright, quiet afternoon, the kind where everything feels calm on the surface, but you know something is about to shift. I had just stepped outside with my laptop and a cup of tea, thinking maybe this time she wouldn't show. But like clockwork, her black SUV rolled up and slid right into its usual spot, front bumper pressing the edge of my driveway like it belonged there. She didn't even glance around, just stepped out, clicked her key fob, and walked away like she owned the block. That was her mistake. Because this time I didn't hesitate. I went inside, grabbed my phone, opened the evidence folder, and dialed the tow company. When they answered, I gave them my address, my name, and the reference number they had assigned me when I first reached out. I told them it was time. Didn't even ask twice. I emailed them the most recent footage from my camera, just in case, and within 20 minutes. I saw the flatbed creeping up the street like a silent ghost. No flashing lights, no drama, just a quiet operation about to begin. The driver stepped out, looked at me, nodded once, then got to work. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He moved with precision, looping the straps, positioning the lift arms, checking his angles. Watched from my front steps as her SUV rose slowly into the air, its weight shifting with a metallic groan. It was surreal. For months, that car had been a symbol of control, of arrogance, of helpless frustration. And now it was just a piece of property being removed like any other. A legally parked vehicle. The tow truck pulled away down the street, her SUV strapped tight to the back, and I stood there watching it disappear until it rounded the corner and vanished. Just like that, she returned about 2 hours later, was inside half listening for it, the sound of heels hitting pavement, the faint jingle of keys, and then silence, followed by shouting. Her voice cracked through the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Where's my car? Where is it? Peeked through the blinds. She paced in circles on the sidewalk, phone in hand, yelling into the speaker. It's gone. Someone took my car. It was right here. She stormed across the street, pounding on my door. I didn't open it, not yet. She screamed through the wood, accusing me of theft, of tampering, of harassment. I let her rage. Then I heard her call the HOA, and then the police. 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, calm and professional. I met them outside, footage already loaded on my phone, a printed statement in hand, and a copy of the city code highlighted and paper-clipped. I explained everything, clearly and quietly, without emotion. I showed them the footage, multiple days, multiple angles, timestamps, everything. I explained the tow company's policy, the legal ordinance, the repeated obstruction. They listened. They nodded. They asked a few questions. Then they spoke with her. She was still frantic, waving her hands, talking fast, accusing me of targeting her. But when they told her that I had every legal right to have her vehicle removed, her face changed. The blood drained from it. She stood there, blinking, realizing that for once, she couldn't win with volume. The officers left without further issue. I went back inside, closed the door, and exhaled. It was done. Finally, it was done. But the aftermath, that was something I hadn't planned for. I thought it would end there, quietly, cleanly, but it didn't. Not because I wanted drama, but because truth has a way of spreading when it's documented properly. That night, I uploaded a short clip from my camera to the neighborhood forum. No commentary, no name-calling, just a simple caption. When the HOA won't help, sometimes you help yourself. The video showed her SUV blocking the driveway on 3 separate occasions, then ended with the tow truck pulling away. Within hours, the post exploded. Dozens of comments poured in, people thanking me. Others sharing their own frustrations with the HOA, being fined for weeds, while certain neighbors violated noise rules with impunity. Being told they couldn't repaint their mailbox while bored, members got away with building unauthorized sheds. Favoritism, the silence, the double standards, it had all been simmering beneath the surface. My video cracked it wide open. Even neighbors I hadn't spoken to before started messaging me. Some stopped by my house just to say thank you or share a story of their own. One woman had been fined for hanging wind chimes, yet the board. President's brother had left construction debris in his front yard for 3 months with no consequences. Another man said his request to widen his driveway had been denied, only to watch a board member's friend get approved for the exact same modification the next week. The tipping point came a few days later, when someone anonymously shared a spreadsheet compiling the HOA's most recent rule violations and who had been cited and who hadn't. The pattern was undeniable. The board wasn't enforcing the rules equally. They were protecting their own. A special meeting was called. At first, I wasn't planning to go. I didn't want to be the center of attention. But people asked me to show up to speak, so I did. The room was packed. The board sat at the front, trying to look composed, but the energy in the room had shifted. There was no fear anymore, no silent compliance. People spoke free, some calmly, others furiously. Yes. I stood and explained what had happened to me. I didn't embellish. I just laid it out. What I'd endured, how I tried to follow the rules, how I was ignored, how I was forced to act on my own because no one on that board lifted a finger. By the end of the meeting, the crowd was chanting for resignations. Wave board members stepped down within a week, including the woman's friend, the one who had protected her all along. For the first time since moving into that neighborhood, I felt heard. Not just tolerated, not just brushed aside, but heard. And the best part, since that day, not a single car has blocked my driveway. Not once. Her SUV sat in the impound lot for weeks. She refused to pay the towing and storage fees, claiming it was an illegal seizure, even after being handed the exact city ordinance that proved otherwise. She tried filing a complaint, first with the police, then the city, and finally the HOA, but none of it worked. The law was the law. Blocking a residential driveway was illegal, and doing it repeatedly turned it into a pattern of public nuisance. Eventually, the city issued her a fine for each reported instance of obstruction. The amount wasn't minor. Between the impound fees, towing cost, citations, and the growing resentment of the neighborhood, the damage went far beyond financial. She had built her comfort on the assumption that no one would ever challenge her. And once that illusion was broken, so was the grip she thought she had over everyone. The board member she was friends with resigned quietly the following week. No announcement, no formal apology, just a sudden email from the HOA saying his position was vacated due to personal scheduling conflicts. Everyone knew that was a lie, but no one needed to say it out loud. The truth had already circulated. People whispered, but they didn't need to scream anymore. The silence spoke volumes. What came next was something I hadn't expected, but quietly appreciated change. The HOA, under pressure from nearly every homeowner on the block, agreed to revisit its enforcement policies. No. Guidelines were proposed rules that actually applied to everyone. No more overlooked violations based on who you knew. No more unofficial favors granted to friends of the board. And most importantly, a new towing policy was adopted. If a vehicle blocks a driveway or fire lane, and there's photographic evidence, the homeowner has the right to initiate a tow immediately. No warning needed. It was clean. It was clear. It was fair. They asked me to join the new oversight committee. A few residents said I'd be perfect for it, that I had the guts to hold people accountable and the patience to do it the right way. I was flattered, but I declined. I didn't need a title. I wasn't looking for power or influence. I just wanted to live in peace. That had been the goal from the start. All I'd ever asked was to be allowed to come and go from my own home without having to beg for basic decency. Now that I had that, I didn't need anything else. The weeks that followed were quiet in the best possible way. The kind of quiet where nothing dramatic happens, no shouting matches, no blocked exits, no smirking SUVs parked like they own the world. I'd step outside in the morning, and the driveway would be clear. My neighbors would wave. A few would stop to chat, thank me again for standing up and doing what most people were too afraid to do. Some shared their own relief small things, like not getting fined for having a guest park slightly off-center, or finally getting approval for a porch repair without endless delays. Even the atmosphere felt different. People seemed lighter, friendlier. There was no more tension hovering in the air like it used to. We had gone through something uncomfortable, but instead of dividing us, it had quietly unified us. It reminded everyone that rules only work if they apply to everyone, and that silence in the face of unfairness only lets it grow louder. As for her, as the woman who started it all, I barely saw her anymore. She kept her distance. The few times I did catch a glimpse, her posture had changed, less proud, more cautious. She never parked in front of my house again. In fact, I didn't see her SUV for a long time, Maybe she sold it. Maybe she just gave up on the idea that the street was her personal property. Either way, I didn't care. I didn't need her apology. I had my resolution. I'd sit on my front steps sometimes, watching the sun dip below the trees, the street bathed in that golden light that makes everything feel clean and whole. I'd look at the driveway, clear open, just how it should be, and feel a quiet kind of pride. Not the boastful kind. Not the revenge-fueled kind. Just the satisfaction of knowing that I didn't stoop. I didn't yell or break things or fight dirty. I fought smart. I played the long game. And in the end, I won by letting her defeat herself. Sometimes, people think revenge has to be loud, explosive, dramatic. But that's not true. Sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all. It's results. It's order. It's walking out of your house, seeing that nothing's in your way, and knowing you made that happen. Not with rage, but with reason. Not with force, but with focus. As the wind rustled, the leaves overhead, and a few kids rode by on bikes, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. No more battles, no more blockades. Just peace, exactly where I'd earned it.